Okay, guys, I'm starting the YouTube live feed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
You bet.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. Everything. You know.
Hey, Greg,
Yeah.
would you be able to make Josh Chappelle, that's in the meeting right now, a presenter? He's going to share the screen for some of the presenters.
Okay, everyone who's on the panelist side of things should be able to share, but I'll make sure he's able to. I'll go ahead and just make him a co-host. How's that? Just because I need
That's
another
perfect.
person.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg.
Yeah, I'll make your room as co-host as well, just in case something weird happens. All right.
Thanks, Josh, we can see it. Okay, we are 11:30 on the dot. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting. Leanne, I'm going to go ahead and call it to order. Leanne, will you do roll call for us, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
Galaviz, Clenny,
Here.
Magnuson,
Here.
Pantera, here. Westenska, here. 4 board members present, 1 absent.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. I appreciate that. All right, well, we will have a guest here at some point when she arrives. I know that I think they're introduced to the group. So with that, we don't have any other introductions this morning. So next up, communications, which there are no current communications. Third bullet point on our agenda is the meeting minutes approval. All board members, have you had a chance to review the meeting minutes? Questions, or I'll entertain a motion to approve these meeting minutes.
I sat in a different seat today, so I'm mixing it up. Anybody else want to make a motion on minutes?
I have reviewed the minutes of the May 11th, 2022 board meeting, and I would move for approval.
Okay, do I have a second, Nikki?
Second.
Thank you, Brian. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you both. Next up is the consent agenda. Again, the consent agenda for the payment of bills and payroll and the financial reports can either be approved as a single motion or separate. And fellow board members, have you had a chance to review? Any questions? If not, we'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move that we approve both the financial statements and the financial reports that's written.
Thank you. Oh, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. I'm up next. It's my last meeting and she's gonna keep me on track for my little list here. So I tried to jot down some notes that I may have to take a peek at. It's my last board meeting. And I asked Jessica if I could attend the all staff meeting last week. I can't look at any of the staff over there because I'm not gonna struggle with that. It has been, you know, as we were talking prior to the meeting, it's crazy how fast 10 years went by. But yet I feel like there's so much more that we can still continue to accomplish. I did have an opportunity to visit with the staff on Friday at the all staff meeting, and I continue to be so impressed. I know, I told you have the Kleenexes right in front of me today. Our staff at the library are just, I cannot say enough good things about our team here at the library. Resilient over the last few years. It's been a little bit of a challenge, but our whole team has just pulled together and supported one another, both with COVID. We've had some great things come out of that process that we've learned, and we've been able to continue to grow and develop the library. I'm a firm believer that the library, the health of the library, is an example of what the health of our community looks like. And our library continues to just reflect the community as what we want our community to be. One of the things I shared with the staff on Friday was continue in the advocacy. I know that advocacy is a really big part of what we're doing on the library. I will continue to advocate in my own platform and my own group of community members that I surround myself with. But I think that every one of us, whether you're on the board of directors, whether you are a staff member, and whether you are a community patron, it's so important for us to all advocate for the library and be able to identify what are the services, what are the programming that we need. I've talked about this nonstop for 10 years, how creative our library staff is in the way of being able to see what the needs are of the community, bringing those needs to supervisors, to the team, and more importantly, able to enact on what those recommendations are instead of saying, hey, I think this would be a great idea. Before we know it, that idea has already been implemented and moving forward, we're seeing the results of that idea. And don't lose sight of that. I think that is so incredibly important, and just is so important to me as well. Our library staff cares deeply for the community, and it is so evident in everything that I see. It just ongoing. The library board, I feel really good about where I'm leaving. We've got incredibly engaged library board members, and I'm excited to see who is coming on board to replace my position. I'm incredibly sad to see that we are losing Sonia Galaviz because she's been an integral part to our board as well. But I have faith in who will be the replacement and who will join us and who will continue to take the library from where we're at now to where we want to continue to be in that growth. I think I probably covered most of my notes. I'm excited to hear how the strategic plan plays out and is developed. That's a really big piece, and I feel so good about the importance that everyone, whether it's on the board or staff within the community and the focus groups, is placing on providing that and putting that strategic plan together, because that really will help us move towards that next level. I've seen so much change in this past 10 years. We hired a new library director. We have a mental health coordinator that joined us. Sadly, we have security at our library. However, on the other hand, we were able to do it in a manner that we recognize the importance and value of that. We now have them on staff within the library, and so they share our vision and our culture here at the library within the city of Boise. So that's incredibly important too. We built Bound Crossing, we've had Hillcrest and Hollister, and again, so many different changes. And I see so many faces that have been here for a number of years. But I also see faces that are in the library, and I'm excited to see that vibrancy grow with our staff, our team, and continue to make a career out of the library. So that, we can stop. I'll be here. I'm trying so hard not to cry right now. Thank you for letting me be part of this. With that, thank you.
Well, I think maybe we should say that you've been a tremendous asset to the board. and a tremendous asset to the community. And it's really been a privilege to be here with you. So thank you.
I appreciate that. It's been an awesome journey. All right, well, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and let's introduce our friend Jill Johnson. I got to meet Jill for the first time, 2 weekends ago, with our summer reading kickoff. It was awesome to meet each other in person. So welcome to today's meeting, Jill.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Tanya, I just want to throw in my thanks for your service to the library and on the board. I have so greatly appreciated your proactive thanks and appreciation for the work that our volunteers do. And I just want to say on behalf of the Friends, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing what you will do next. And we've appreciated your friendship along this road. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill.
I do have one quick update to the composition of our board. Our treasurer, Celia Renner, who was with us for just about 4 years, stepped down in April. And so we have not identified a new treasurer yet. So I am currently dual hatted as the president and the treasurer. We're working on recruiting new board members. And last month in May, I'm happy to report that Kirsten Ocker joined the board. Kirsten is a lawyer with the State Insurance Fund. And more importantly, she is an avid user of the Boise Public Library and has been. She's a Boise native and she remembers going into the children's section and all the way through her adult life. So we're thrilled to have Kirsten join the board. And then the last update I have is we had our spring porch sale was it last weekend? I don't know. It was Memorial Day weekend. And we made $3,300. So that was just about on par for what we do for a porch sale. And it was a first time for us with the installation of the new tables outside of the library. We sort of shifted our way around the corner, facing more of the greenbelt. And I think we actually caught some new patrons maybe coming off of the greenbelt, seeing our signs. So anyway, it was a big success. And thank you to the library again for helping us make that happen.
That was a great report, Jill. Thank you for that. And I like the idea of switching it. I can see where you would have captured additional walkers on the greenbelt, piqued their interest, and it wasn't near as hot. Or I know.
No.
As well.
Yeah, we've learned our lesson. No more 4th of July. No more 4th of July sales. That was a bad idea. And we only lost about 20 minutes at the end of the day to rain, so it wasn't that. So even though it was rainy, it didn't really impact us that much either. So.
Oh, very good. Very good. All right. Well, thank you so much to you and the volunteers.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the work. Thanks, Jill. Okay, next up, we did have a report for the foundation. However, we don't have a representative and they're not able to join us today. So I know we'll catch them on the next board meeting. And so with that, I believe up next is Jessica.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of all the staff for your service and for joining our staff meeting. It means so much to the staff to know that they're appreciated by the board members, and particularly the role that you played throughout the pandemic.
We go with the talk. That's sort of our.
More than earlier. I think we're all used to the online show. You gotta show the pet.
We just
Yeah.
enjoyed it, so. It's not.
Thank you. So I have been working with the mayor's office and we're getting close to being able to have 2 new board members, and we're hoping that the timing works for them to be appointed later this month by the mayor and confirmed by city council, hopefully joining in July. We think that that timing will work out, so we may not have the gap that we unfortunately had with when Nikki and Brian joined last year's council's not. Well, fingers crossed on that one, and have been working really to have 2 new board members. One that picks up from where Tanya left off, and then one also that really helps us fill the gap that Sonia still returns as well. So we've had some good discussions there, and when those are confirmed, we'll make sure we send that to you ahead of time so you get a chance to see their backgrounds and a chance to think about them. And actually it'll come up later when we when Heidi gives the update on strategic plans, we're thinking about how are we transitioning? How do we bring those two new people into that thinking that work? So we've started doing some of that as well. And then Tanya alluded to our introduction, our mystery guest. Actually, that is Ashley Hammond, who is our new mental health coordinator, who started at the end of last month, and she's up at City Hall. But when she comes in, we'll make sure you guys get a chance to meet her. We're extremely excited to have her here, and we're also trying to be very well behaved and not have her everywhere all at once doing everything. That's been Sarah and my commitment to her, to give her actually time to learn the library and to really do that deep needs analysis with us. And we're very excited about her, she was hired because of her ability to really help us shape our role. So don't scare her off has been kind of our mantra, even though she's already proven to be very valuable. And then the last thing I just wanted to highlight, one of the requests that you all had for me is to really show you some of the examples of where we're seeing advocacy for libraries, and particularly really supporting freedom to read and the role that library boards play in having a strong collection development policy. And we saw the chair of the Meridian Library District had an op-ed in the Idaho Statesman, and I copied that for you because I think it just has some really great background and thinking behind how that board is really looking at its role in collection development and requests for reconsideration, and really promoting that freedom to read and freedom of views and expressions. I wanted to make sure you guys had a chance to say that. And with that, if anyone has any questions, I know we have a lot of the questions I think will be in the budget discussion, and I'll talk more about setting that up. But I would also just have discussion about the library day to day.
I noted in your report, the chief administration officer, is that a new position?
It is a new to the library position. Last year, we had one of the management team members resigned and left the library, and I was able to take that role and repurpose it to a role that aligns with the chief administrative officers across the city. So that position allows us to have somebody who really oversees a lot of the operations and the administration and works directly with other city leads in that same role. And it was a position that also at the time had some library staff report to it. So the information and homebound services reported into that position, but I moved that under the information services because I wanted to bring the library expertise together. And this position, it is new, not new to the city, but new to the library, is a repurposing of that previous position. It'll also oversee a lot of the budget. So right now, we're going to talk about budget, and I think it's going to be like 6 of us. We're going to have this person really lead with Kim, our budget process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, as always. Next up is our old business. So we have Sarah Kelly Chase here to do our public library policy review.
Last one with you. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is actually finishing up section 4. I tried to do a good explanation for you because we did make a lot of changes for our rules of conduct in an effort to make them easier to explain to users and easier for staff and security to apply them. So the first section is just policy 4.04, and that's on security, not suggesting any changes on that. Regulation 4.04A, that's the rules of conduct. And in your packet, there was under the policy summary, I kind of numbered it to tag to the ones that we changed. Did you have any questions about the rules of conduct? I know there are a lot of differences on there.
Comment, not a question.
Yeah,
On the revised rule of conduct number 5, it's 5 in the marked up version that we saw. I was thinking if we follow the form and be a little bit more emphatic, if you were to put a comma after premises, selling items on library premises.
oh, and then adding right there.
Yeah, and
Okay,
it struck me that the word unless is a little more emphatic than except. Unless they've gotten permission from the library, but
Okay.
that's just a suggestion.
sure, thank you.
And now I'm really not adding much value here on 17. Needs to be a space between at and.
Oh, we had a few weird translations going back and forth between PDF and Word. Thank you. I will make sure that gets fixed. You see some other ones with some little underlines to fix too. Thank you. I appreciate the attention to detail.
Any other questions? Feedback.
And then the only other piece was regulation 4.04. And that was the security appeal process. And again, we didn't suggest any other changes for that.
A comment I want to make about the security
Yes, sir.
process, and
Yeah.
reading through it. I wondered if the appeal time window limits are really necessary. There's a lot of verbiage in there about the appeal time limit. The structure of the paragraph is sort of accommodates the appeal comments. And I'm just wondering if during the suspension period at any time, we wouldn't at least entertain an appeal as opposed to putting a strict limit on it.
I think it depends. We see a broad range of suspension time limits up to a year. So I think keeping it closer to the beginning as opposed to someone who maybe has been suspended for a year, I think it would be harder to work with an appeal 6 months into that. Do you have a different opinion on that?
No, I think that's good. I think at some point you want to sort of, finalize it and move on. So that,
And we do, just for your clarification, if someone is suspended and if it's not a volatile situation, security and staff have access to this notice of suspension and appeal process. They're actually handed this other piece of paper where we write out which rule of conduct was this a violation of, how long is the suspension for, and the listing of what the time limits are and how you do that appeal, and then contact information, and actually the appeal process on the back as well. So we do try and keep it clear if someone's in the midst of that.
If someone were on a 1-year suspension and they were to write a letter to the library director in the form of an appeal and say,
Yeah.
I feel bad, I learned my lesson, I apologize, I really value coming to the library, I'd like to be able to have my suspension ended. Wouldn't we entertain such a thing?
I'll pass that to Jessica.
I do, yes, we would, but I do think that there is something important about having it closer to that time, particularly a year-long suspension. That isn't a first time. Yeah, that is not. That right, that is a position where it's serious. And so having, for me to be able to do due diligence, I need to be able to talk to staff that were involved in that and have a clear understanding of what happened close to that event. And I think the longer something,
Lose the detail.
you lose the detail.
Okay.
And I think you lose the clarity as well. Yeah. We start a year countdown, here's where it is. And then we just have real clarity about what those dates are.
All right, thank you.
Anything else?
All right,
Thank you.
thank you, Sarah.
Sure.
On strategic plan review, and after Katie, or along with Katie, we go back to Center.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me join you all to provide a briefing. And thank you, Tanya, for all of your support with the strategic plan process all along and all the support you've provided for staff. Yeah, I will miss you very much personally, so thank you. So strategic plan briefing. So here's an overview. We're going to review the updated high-level schedule, and I want to take a moment to thank you for our last meeting. We really appreciate and heard what you shared last time, encouraging us to take the time we need to do this project well. So thank you for that encouragement. We are taking that to heart. So we are going to review an updated high-level schedule. We're also going to talk about staff engagement, the survey and listening sessions, which have begun, which we're very excited about. We're also going to talk about some current work that's happening with the Community Partners Focus Group, board involvement, and next steps. So here is the updated phase 1 schedule. So last time I told you we'd be seeing a new graphic for the timeline. So this is our updated graphic. We currently don't have months listed at the top, although where you see that orange starting engagement is June right now. And in the very far right is the phase 1 summary. And we are purposely not making that specifically September because we really do want to be adaptable as needed through August to make sure that we're speaking to all the people that we need to speak to and feel like we have enough data that we're ready to move into the summary phase. And so, or the summary of the phase 1. So you can see that the engagement, we're starting with the staff survey and listening sessions. We'll be moving into the partner and community member interviews, and we're refining what that looks like. And we'll be refining that over the next few weeks. And then we'll move into the community survey and listening sessions. And then you'll see at the same time, additional work is being done. That's with the staff member work groups, the topical work groups, and with for consulting. So that's data collection, community context summary, and peer library benchmarking. And so we're working on all of these pieces as well that we're going to have completed by the time that we move into that summary for phase 1. And you see that board meetings will step bottom. No, you're good. And so our next one is so staff survey. The staff survey launched on June 1st. It takes approximately 20 minutes to complete. And the 4 major areas of the survey cover mission, values, and vision, both where we are currently and some ways that staff are thinking they'd like to see the future be, current perceptions and library experience, organizational excellence, and impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Just a couple of questions about that. So by yesterday morning, there were already 42 staff members who had completed the survey. I can't give you an updated data from that any more than that because we don't have access to the survey because yes.
So how many staff members are there?
That is a great question. I want to say, I was going to check on this. 109, 100.
So 120.
120, okay.
I'm sorry, I should have made you like. Made it like a pop quiz. But
At one point, I know it was 109, but I should have remembered that yesterday.
Yeah.
We've done some hiring. Very thankfully. So that's just as of yesterday, but all of the survey is being hosted and monitored by Bird Consulting. So we certainly will get all of the data out eventually, but I'm checking in with them to see how we're doing. So 42 so far is pretty good. We're very excited about that. It does close on the 22nd of June. So we have 3 weeks total for the survey, and we are going to continue encouraging staff. So we really are hoping that all staff members will take that survey because it's going to give us so much information. Yes.
I would just want to recognize too, that if it's 20 minutes, just making sure that I'm sure this conversation is occurring, but sometimes if it's somebody at the front desk, do we have uninterrupted time where they can step away and work on that? Again, I know it's probably already in process, but I know sometimes those little pieces that can really help encourage and drive those all staff to get that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something we're encouraging supervisors to make sure that and that was one of the reasons we had it open for 3 weeks, is asking supervisors, please, sometime in these next 3 weeks, make sure that every single person who reports to you has at least 20 minutes for the to this time. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and then the listening sessions, we've also launched the listening sessions this week. So the first staff listening session is complete. The 3 areas of the staff listening session cover mission and vision, community reflection, and at work at Boise Public Library. So the supervisors and managers participated in the 90-minute facilitated discussion on Tuesday. And it was really exciting to hear the various topics that were discussed, and the engagement that was in that session was really inspiring. So 59, actually 60 as of this morning, additional staff members have responded to the invitation to attend upcoming staff listening sessions. So we have 2 virtual sessions for staff and an in-person session for staff, and we've capped them at no more than 20. And we're still gathering information from staff who haven't responded yet to see if we need to add any additional or in-person sessions. But we're really excited that those have begun, and can't wait to see what the summary is. And I can share too, in the staff survey, we're being really careful that they're completely anonymous. The only demographic that we're asking for in the staff survey is for them to let us know how many years they've worked here. We've got some other interesting data that I do remember. The first one is less than a year, and that's 38 staff members. And then we've got variations that the final variation is 11 plus years, and that's also 38 staff members. So that was, and then different numbers in between. So that was interesting to see. And then for the staff listening sessions, those are completely anonymous as well. We're gathering all the comments, but we're not attaching them to anyone's name. So we really encouraging staff to be as candid as they can, because the more honest feedback we get, the more we have to build on. And then this community partners work group update. So they picked up the discussion of the steering committee. So we didn't meet with the steering committee in May, but when we met with them in April, some of the information that we discussed was really wanting to make sure that we talked to the potential and low users that, we're trying to, we feel pretty confident that we're going to get a lot of feedback from active library users. We have a lot of hope for that, but we also really want to make sure that we're speaking to non-users of the library to really, really be relevant for the Boise community. And so the steering committee had provided, originally the community engagement work group had provided a start to stakeholders for this, this type. The steering committee refined it and added additional things to consider. And so we've shared 7 topics with the community partners work group, and I've asked them to make some recommendations about specific organizations to help make sure that we're getting the word out. And they're also going to be making recommendations of whether the communication with those organizations is an email, kind of a VIP invitation to the survey, and asking them if they'd be willing to share the survey with their constituents, or a listening session with that organization and their constituents, or an interview with like the executive directors. We're waiting to hear some recommendations from that group, so we're making sure we're following up on that piece. And finally, you've seen this slide before, we're bringing it up again because of the community conversations listening sessions. We're hoping to do those in July, but with it's taking a little bit of thought with a significant change with the board that we're going to be having 2 new board members. And so we just wanted to check in with them needing to get up to speed, what thoughts you might have about how we would want to pursue the listening sessions with board member attendance in July.
So is that a group session with the whole board, or how is that done?
So the community conversations and listening sessions, we're scheduling 6 to 7 of those. 5 of them will be in person, 1 at each location. And then we're looking for at least 1, possibly 2 virtual sessions. And something we talked about before is potentially having a board member at each of those sessions, an individual board member at each of those sessions to help encourage
So-
people to-
Would it be fair to go back to a new one-on-one with Bert for the new members?
potentially, yeah, that's our recommendation to make.
Yeah, I think attending those and split, if there's 5 of them, there's 5 board members, to split it up, that would be right.
Seems in particular that having new members and now old members, participate in the community conversations, to listen in, be very valuable.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably fine if they're new to the board because the primary purpose is really listening. Yeah. So as long as we have appointed board members by then. If not, I don't know if we could just take extra sessions and be really good about sharing information back.
Do you know the schedule for the city council meeting?
We are, part of it is the mayor's, when the mayor is able to have discussions and finalize what goes to city council. We have a meeting on the 14th, and I think if the 14th is the next meeting, and I think then the 28th. So we're hoping either one of those two, that would then get us.
But if it, is that the 28th of which month?
June, sorry. So next Tuesday, the 14th would be our first slot that we could have approvals, and then if not, hopefully.
So if it happens on the 28th, then the July time was fine. But
Yep.
if it slides out,
If it-
again, this,
And that's we're hoping.
so what if the three of us took the early ones in the month,
Yeah,
and then if they're appointed, they could take the later ones, and if they're not, I would say we should repeat.
okay. That's a good plan.
Yeah, we'll have Gary follow up with the tentative schedule right now and see what things are free. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then finally, just for our next steps then, we'll give you an update in July. We'll report on the staff engagement. We should be able by then to have pulled up some high level themes that we saw that we'll be able to share with you about the staff engagement. We're hoping that we'll have started the community engagement by the time we meet with you next, and further clarify the involvement for new board members, and we'll be finalizing the tactics and the schedule of officer.
Any questions for Heidi? Great, thank you for that information and the clarity around that, especially with the new incoming board members. That will be really important for them. Phil, do you think?
I don't have anything. The last steering committee meeting was canceled, so I don't have any new updates.
All right, we look forward to next month. Next up is fiscal year 2023 budget. And we're going to kick it off with an overview with Jessica.
I will get this scheduled. So we have 2 action items for you today. The first one is the bigger one, and this is our FY23 budget. As I said, it's going to be a team effort here. I first want to thank you so much for sending your questions ahead of time. It was really helpful for us. We met about it Monday, we met about it Tuesday, we were meeting about it this morning. So we're going to try to, as we set up your discussion, answer some of those questions that you sent ahead of time. So FY23, and then the second thing is we're going to have interim budget change request for FY22. So after we talk about the 23 budget, we're going to step back and talk about the current FY22 budget, because we've had a piece that we thought we were going to be requesting in 23 that actually we have been able to get funding for in 22, which we're very excited about. So we'll talk more about that. But so how we're going to set this up, we got a question on, hey, help us remember the context and what were the goals and how does this all work. So I'm going to set up the overview. And Kim Laura is going to do our general and heritage funds with you, so she can do that deep dive and answer some of the questions about where things have been moving and such. We're going to have Kathy on standby and really help you with the equipment requests, some of the pieces that we're putting in place in terms of things that we're purchasing for our buildings. And then we're going to bring in Sean Wilson, who's going to do a larger overview of sort of the capital requests and some of the big particular maintenance and repair here at this downtown location. Tanya and Phil, you know Sean very well. Brian and Nikki, you will get to meet him, and you will get to love him just as much as Tanya and Phil. No pressure. Okay. So, well, look, here's where we're gonna start with the FY 23 budget. And just as a reminder, here's sort of where we are in the overall city budget process. You know, starting with the very beginning of the sort of budget interactive and having this administration be very interested in having a community discussion about the budget. And so one of the things I sent to you was the city council budget workshop that I attended at the end of May. So, you know, that when that was set up, Courtney Washburn spoke on behalf of the mayor's office. Eric Villamoria talked about the budget process, and then every director shared with council sort of their what will be their requests in the FY 23 budget. We are bringing that to you now. Quite frankly, there's one piece that we'll talk about that is moving or will be filled in, but we've also done some work to make sure we've got the right process in place for when particularly some numbers become finalized, we come back to you on. So budget book will be released later. We'll have a second city council budget workshop, public feedback, a public hearing, and then we are on track for the budget adoption in the end of August so that it will start the fiscal year in October 1st. Then one of the questions is sort of what are we seeking to accomplish through the annual budget process? And I'm bringing up the slide that Eric Villamoria shared with us. Josh, can you go all the way through? It should have, yep, perfect, thank you. Yeah, you know, because this I think is really important that, you know, for us, that idea of fiscal responsibility and really making sure that every budget balances and we're spending money so that we know what the expenses are, we know where revenue are, and we are adjusting as we go. I know how challenging this has been, particularly for those of my staff that deal with equipment, purchasing of materials, anything that we're seeing just inflation rates, and then also just trying to schedule maintenance and getting people in buildings to do repair. It's been extremely challenging. And so the budget has really had to think about how are we accounting for some of that variance. And then I just want to talk about some of the high level themes that you probably heard if you watched the May City Council workshop. One, this idea of how can we be fiscally responsible in a time with some significant changes. And then also that proactive use of one-time savings. You know, we've got some real, right now, some real exciting federal investments that have been able for us to take advantage as a city to really respond to community priorities, to respond to growth, to improve services. And then I really want to call out the priority that we've had, you know, directors have discussed this. This was our number one priority as directors, is what we're calling stabilize the workforce, is just keeping the people that we have and helping them have a living wage. So one of the things I'm super excited about is last night, the city council approved an inter-budget change that will actually put in place some of the requests that we had for FY23 in terms of a 5.9% cost of living adjustment and a change in the living wage from $13.53 to $16.15 an hour. And that will go into place in July. So there was enough savings that instead of knowing that we could do that in the FY23, but the recognition of, hey, we've got the money now, let's not wait. Let's go ahead and make those staff adjustments in July, which I think is really important. We are just seeing the increased costs that people have for housing, for food, and transportation. And when all the city departments said, our number one priority is our workforce and making sure that we retain our talented and skilled staff, that they put dollars behind it. So I was really, really pleased to see that move forward. And then I want to talk about, I'm going to share with you the slides that I shared with council, because they do talk about sort of what were our priorities as a library. I had 2 slides that I shared with them. I talked about what were the FY22 investments and what impact those had, and use that to set up the FY23. So highlighting sort of in FY22, we requested and received funding to add IDA, an Idaho library app, which, hats off to our IT team. We had, fiscal year starts October 1st, and we had that launched by November 1st. They did such a good job of getting that loaded and ready and in users' hands. And then, as you know, we've really talked a lot about adding new titles, because that is, as our population is growing, as our youth as our youth usage is growing, we need to make sure we've got additional titles. And as we've talked about, that inflation is also really challenging for us. And want to highlight some of the things we did in terms of increased programs and services. Story times in all of our locations and our local parks, continuing that work with Public Works. Not Public Works, Parks and Rec. Because we are seeing in some places where we will have 80 or plus kids coming to story time. And so having story times in our buildings and out is really important. Our partnerships with Central District Health for community screening, Jesse Tree and our home pop-ups for housing, and our mental health. And then safe and welcoming facilities. So when I think about sort of the priorities that we budgeted for last year and this year, improved access to materials, increased programs and services, and safe and welcoming facilities. We've talked a lot about the ADA improvements. We talked about Wi-Fi outside our buildings. We'll talk a lot more about this. So those are really the same themes that went from 22 to 23. Improved access to materials, increased programming and services, and the safe, welcoming facilities. So when I think about some of the investments we're requesting, the iOS discovery layer, having a better search function is going to be really important to that. And then the automated sorter was what I talked about with council at the end of May, was the piece that we thought would be an FY23 request, and now we've brought it back to you as a FY22 request. Here's the little thing where one of the pieces that's moving, really excited about this, that there was in the budget forecast, realizing, oh, there is enough money for this sorter. So we'll ask you to report to approve that later. And then the one-time increase for materials. We are recognizing we've got real challenges with inflation, particularly with our materials. So that was, now we've been able to request that as well. When I think about increased program and services, that to me is staff. We need to keep our trained and talented staff in order for us to have more of those programs and services. And then the safe and welcoming facilities. This will be some of the requests that we will be talking with you after Sean has his presentation. So if there's any questions on sort of a very high level there, if not, we'll turn it on to Kim, who is going to start actually going through the packet and how does the story of what we're trying to do then actually reflect in the different funds of the library overseas.
President, members of the board, my name is Kim Malcolm-Rye, and I'm the finance manager supporting library. And so, as Jessica mentioned, we're going to do kind of an overview on the fiscal year 23 budget, reviewing the general fund and then also the heritage fund. So Jessica highlighted in her presentation, the 23 budget was developed to align with the library's current values and priorities. And so we began the fiscal year 23 budget build process by using fiscal year 22 as the base budget. From there, we looked at historical spend and we kind of realigned the budget to the appropriate accounts where the spend did occur. The next step to that is we incorporated the various resource requests that were over and above the current services that we were providing. And that would include like increases to the materials, programs, and services. So we'll highlight some of the areas of where you can see that in the budget. So this is going to be kind of like follow the bouncy ball. There's a lot of accounts and, account description, and I will do my best to kind of highlight where we are on the page, what page and where we are on the page, so you can see the actual budget figures. So we'll start with page 12, and this will be our revenue section. And I just want to highlight that overall, we are expecting an increase of approximately 119,000. And that's from fiscal year 22 to 23. And the material increases, just quickly, the material increases can be seen because of our system share, courier, our facility rentals, but then it's offset by a decrease in a print and copy charges. And then I'll touch a little bit on the Igr transfers. So let's break down the actual accounts that impact the significant increases or changes to our revenue. So if we look at system share, so that'll be the third revenue account line down, 308003. We're seeing that from fiscal year 22 to 23, there is an increase of 62,000. And we're going from 211,000 to 279,000. So this represents the increase is the revenue recovery from the Links Consortium members, and this is for the intra-library system discovery layer. If we continue on down halfway, there is the courier 312003. There is reflected a $45,000 increase, and we're anticipating increased revenue due to the additional Meridian and CUNA branches being added. In addition, the mobile application involved under this account line. Then looking 4 lines down from courier, this is facility rental. I just want to highlight that there is approximately a $9,000 increase from current year. And we have new agreements with the Learning Lab and Step Ahead for actual recovering room rental. So those 3 major increases in our revenue are slightly offset by a decrease in our print and copy services or charges. That is account 318005. So if you go up 1, 2, 3 lines. So what we did, we really looked at historical information. We looked at fiscal year 21 and 22 trends where we're headed. And we took a more conservative approach to budgeting that revenue source. A lot of people are not printing as much. So we really wanted to kind of bring that back down to what was more realistic on our expectations in 23. So the last line I want to touch on in the revenue section is the second to last line, the Igr transfers. In prior years, this account was used to balance the general fund. And so this is representative of the tax support that the library would receive to equal out our revenue over our expenditures. So it was really like a plug, just so it was a net zero. Fiscal year 22, they did remove that. So now you're truly seeing departmental revenue only. And so, yes. Does anyone have a question on the revenue section at this point? Okay. So at the bottom of page 12, we'll begin our expenditures, and I just want to touch on the salaries. Jessica did highlight that the 5.9% increase was approved by council. So that increase is already reflected in the fiscal year 23 budget. So we're increasing at approximately 644,000 from 22 to 23.
And this is primarily increases that have been approved and filling open headcount.
Yes, so the budget, it is the increase and it is budgeted for all the positions, whether or not they are filled.
And all the benefits, I assume, are just a calculation off of the salaries.
They are, and it also includes temp wages, overtime, flex rewards. So they're all just percentages, standardized percentages. So now if we go to page 13, this will be page 13 through 15. This is where you get to have fun and
All of that bouncing.
yes, and I'll do my best to follow my own. So-
Interrupt just one second. So the actual under 2022, is that year to date?
That is year to date. I ran the report a week ago.
I just want to make sure I was understanding it correctly.
Okay, so beginning in the maintenance and operation category, or M&O. Overall, so this would be the last page on page 15. Overall, there was a decrease in our M&O of approximately 43,000. So we went from 6.985 million to 6.942 million. And
So since we're on that line, if you go back and compare 21 to 22, there was a substantial increase. And I'm kind of curious about sort of the trend here that like 1 year we went way up and now we're going flat. What are the factors that are going into that?
I do have to call out, one of the most obvious things would be like the indirect cost reimbursements that unfortunately the library did not have control over. So that would be 4 lines up from that total. So these are like centralized charges, let's say for like human resources, the budget office, county, just indirect support that we receive.
So that's not forecasted in a way that's predictable.
Unfortunately, I can say not, only I will say because we are constantly adding positions in various other departments. The cost allocation plan is based on their budget and then how they distribute, whether it's by square footage or by position or FTE count. So it's an ongoing change depending on costs that are being incurred.
So what you're saying, I think, is like today going forward, you get HR support from the city, right? And you don't know what that's going to cost.
We haven't forecasted, to Kim's point, it is forecasted and we know sort of that what we can expect, but sometimes the actuals come back different from the forecast. And that's what happened in that year. And it did have it was a higher
Yeah, I mean,
variance
that
than
was
we
like
had expected.
that was like a 50% increase from 21 to 22.
Yes.
It's odd to me that the city can operate that way. Like it's a city issue, not a library issue.
Do you want us to spend more time exploring it for you?
I mean, I guess in other places I've worked, it's been like, okay, you're this big or you got this many square feet and here's your allocation for the year. And there's no, at the end of the year, surprise. I guess I would wait. If it continues to be a surprise year after year, then I think it escalates to, we need to look at this.
I think we all recognize that line is a big budgeting challenge for the library. Because it's 2/3 of the total maintenance and operations budget. They don't have control over it, you mentioned, and it's highly unpredictable.
So just as an example, recently we went through a reallocation of resources on the maintenance service. My understanding from that is that that would be predictable going forward,
Yes,
that particular piece.
and and the city is trying to do that same process with. And, the city is trying to be predictable because it's not good for anybody when you have a variance like that.
Yeah.
And, you will see this year's indirect go higher because of that change that we made. And, one of the things we're working with York and team is, okay, what is the reporting that we do so that you are able to see more into that? Because it's helpful for our planning as well.
Because now you're forecasting another 10% increase on that for 23. And so if you go back to 21, I don't know, that's a hugely escalating cost. Okay, interesting.
And, some of that, as there is real benefit to the library in that, particularly, that our HR costs, our HR indirect costs will go up. HR is adding, 4 security staff that will directly support the library. They're adding an HR business partner, which will directly support the library. So there is real benefit to having the capacity in the other city departments that support the library. And then it is, to your point, also important for us to be watching and understanding what goes into that and what we, are we getting the value that we all expect out of that model.
So earlier you said that there was going to be security expertise on staff. Is that in this line or is that in your?
Yeah, that'll be in HR.
So do you have a guess of how many FTE equivalents are in that?
I have,
I mean, total, not just for security, but HR, security, everything that's in that line.
I don't have that information, but certainly we can ask central accounting if they can provide some insight to that. And I don't know if that might be something the board is interested in having them as a guest speaker to kind of walk through how they calculate the indirect cost rate.
Yeah. I need to think about that and try to figure out the right way to do that. Because, well, it's a major expense, and it seems like you have some control over it, but not all of it. Because you make requests, or the library makes requests of, well, we need these services. And you're signing up for their charges.
You're not asking for more services, you're asking for substantially the same services you can get.
With the exception of like the secure, I mean, we've got the security services, but I know that isn't IT embedded in that? There's so many other things that are embedded in that. It's not just
legal.
the FTE, it's our portion of that cost that's spread out across all of the different departments. It is tough that it's not a set amount each time, and it is, but it is out of our, I think for the most part, out of our control.
I think some sort of reporting or more information, just that, we know what the charge is and how it's calculated. Is that part of the question? I mean, I understand that it will vary based on how much HR you use, but it would be nice to know kind of what the rate is, how it's reported, how it's calculated. It's how you confirm you're paying back the right amount, for example. If that makes sense, or just, we just don't have any detail on how that's put together.
That makes sense. I think just maybe adding that, like you're recommending to have that explored a little bit in a future board meeting, or a little bit more insight as to how that first calculated.
Yeah, because I don't, for example, have enough information of how it's calculated to even say if something should change, right?
Right.
I mean, to Phil's point, maybe it should be looked at, but I don't have enough context data.
Because that's
Tell you about that.
25% of your budget. And okay, thank you.
So going back to the expenditures and breaking down the major decreases for this fiscal year. You know, we touched on the salaries and the benefits. So now looking at the maintenance and operations and the changes. So the majority of the changes that we have seen for the decrease resulted from the facilities maintenance centralization. We had the security services that where we took contract labor and now it's also centralized under HR. We also had a one-time increase to our materials budget. So following along, going back into the details, let's talk about the facility maintenance centralization. So this affects several accounts. The main account is on page 14 under our janitorial services. And this will be halfway down the page, account 542008. So you can see in fiscal year 22, we had 224,000 budgeted and now there's zero. So that all went to the facilities services operations, FSO. Additionally, on page 15, our utilities that were applicable, that would be under more than halfway down, it'd be the, excuse me. It's about top four lines down, beginning with like power, gas, water, sewer, trash, sewer, geo. A majority of the budget from fiscal year 22 is no longer in 23, as it was also transferred for the facilities maintenance centralization. And this is on page 15.
So could I ask a quick question? Do all of those essentially now show up in that indirect cost reimbursement line?
They will, but not directly.
Okay.
The budget went over to facilities, but then it will be allocated based on, I guess, our square footage.
Sure. Yeah, we saw that.
Yeah, that's exactly, this is,
Okay.
this is what it looks like.
And now that'll kind of become one of those indirect
Yeah.
costs instead of.
Yeah, and yeah,
separate line
it's right,
item.
it's not a separate line item, but like,
Okay.
so the calculation. of the-
Thank you.
And then the last piece on the reduction for facilities maintenance is our repair and maintenance section. So that's more than halfway down, beginning with the account 559. So all of the buildings and grounds, structural, landscape, paint, signage, a majority of that also transferred over to facility services. Any questions on the facility maintenance piece? Okay, so then looking at security services. Now we're going to go back to page 14. And near the bottom of page 14, about 6 lines up, is contract labor. That's account 542044. So this is where we had our contract labor for our services for the security. And so now that it's centralized, we no longer need that budget, and that budget was transferred over. So we go from 142 to 0 in fiscal year 23. Okay, and as I mentioned, that those reductions are offset by a one-time increase in materials. So we did receive a total of $350,000 for one-time material increases. This is actually split between our digital materials and also all of like adult, youth. And so For the digital, that is account 537. Back on page 14. The very first line, 537014, digital materials. So you can see an increase from 22 to 23. We go from 561,000 to 759,000. A portion of the 353,000 is seen here. That's the increase. And then the majority, the balance of the 353 is found on page 16. And that is our material that we capitalized. That would be the adult, microforms, youth material, periodicals.
The account number.
The account number for that category would be 581 and on page 16.
I see.
And I just want to mention, in our statistics, it reflects that our digital material, they may indicate that the checkout for ebooks may be declining, but the e-audio checkout is showing an increase with this format. Plus, it's slightly more expensive.
Can anyone comment on what's going on with ebooks? I'm a big ebook fan. I'm reading one now. And I'm surprised to see it not growing.
I can speak to the audio. That's all I've been doing is the audio, because I can multitask and do other things while I'm listening to the blog.
And we can tell people are commuting again, because we're seeing
Yep.
it's the e-audio when pandemic hit and people didn't commute. It would be more like, okay, I'm going to go on. That's the change we're seeing, and they're just so much more expensive as titles. That's out of work.
So it's a shift in the mix.
There's also,
It's, and Kathy can speak to that.
There's one additional piece, and that's we are struggling to grow. the collection. So while we've spent almost 100,000 more in the last year, we have not grown that collection at all because we continue to have to rebuy titles. So when metered access runs out, we are spending the money again. We don't get a discount, it's still the same amount. So we haven't been able to expand the collection very much. We can change the titles that we're buying, but if it's a popular title, we're just going to keep buying that same title over and over, like we do for the print collection, but it's just so much more expensive in digital. So when you have a group of avid users, you get tired of seeing the same titles over and over, and it gets harder to then grow usage if you're not growing the collection as well. So what we would like to do with some of that 353 that we asked, and that is for all of the collections across the board, physical and digital. We're going to put a large chunk of it to digital because inflation is so much higher in digital. But we want to give it a fresh influx of titles, grow the collection, and see then if that increases the usage so that we can see, are we seeing a direct correlation between lack of growth in the collection and flat line of checkout, or have we hit our kind of threshold of this is how many people are going to use this?
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you.
That's a really good question.
So the one last item I'd like to call your attention to is on page 14. So we'll go back, and it's about halfway down the page. And it's the miscellaneous services account, 542015. The budget for that is 604,000. And I just wanted to call out that this budget is for the Ada Community Library annexation compensation agreement, as well as the Garden City agreement. Garden City Library agreement. Okay, any questions on the general fund?
Yeah, you might have to just humor me because this is my first year. So I know that you said they removed the fund that was the transfer from the tax revenues general fund. How does that process work? Because it just bothers me a little bit that it reflects as like negative 14.7. So how are we able to predict what that will be? Yeah, because usually I would see that sort of budgeted as a revenue item.
You, in the
Yeah.
past, yes, you
Yeah.
would. They have that, we will no longer see that in our budget going forward. And that occurs across all departments. I think it was determined just so that when you look at a department's budget, you can truly see the general fund support that a department may need based on the revenue and projected expenditures.
So what's the process though for us knowing what general fund support the city will give to the library? Do they just make it whole? Or I just don't know what that process is.
Well, how would I answer that? They're not going to give us on paper support.
Okay.
I mean, they are. We are
Sure.
running the library based on the budget that we're presenting and as approved by council.
So maybe it shows,
like an
if I
authority to
pull up
spend.
the full
So
city
you-
budget.
Yeah.
You're
It'll
gonna-
show,
Sense
yeah.
in that.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you're gonna ask the city and city council to approve this 15.2 number at the end, right? So once they approve that.
Yeah, no, and Nikki's got a good point, is actually when you look at the city material, each department will have that total revenue.
So,
Yeah,
Okay,
so now that, I mean, the very last line, the shortfall number really doesn't tell us anything, right?
It just indicates that we spend $14 million more than what we bring in departmental revenue. That is what the plug used to be.
yeah.
So are they gonna approve the 14.7 or the 15.2?
They'll approve our 15.2. That is our operating budget.
Okay.
So I guess implicitly they're approving the 14.7.
yeah. Yes.
We should have a select.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I just wanted to understand
Yeah,
more how
that's a good point about how the book that's being built for the city, this rolls up into it, and we can do, we'll make sure we'll start, when that comes out, you'll see actually similar great.
Well, and I think you've been sending these to the overall.
Yeah.
process, too.
Because then they report quarterly on that.
So this is kind of an aside. So the budget roll up's great. This is something I've been trying to figure out since I've been on board. If traditionally, you could take the view of the library that what we deliver are books and ebooks, very simply. And so everything else is overhead. And so, it's important to make that collection as rich as possible. So how can we get as much money as possible to spend on it? And it's more complicated than that, because a key thing the library does is you provide programs that are content to the community. You provide, we have all these online resources that I think we're paying for that are content. And, I think one measure of the library might be, how do we take the funds and resources we've got and make that content as rich as possible. And so every time I look at the budget, I kind of go through this and say, well, how do I identify the content? Where are we spending money on content? And where are we spending money on support for that content? I'm trying to get the two straight in my head. And I guess I'm interested in if that's a valid way to look at what we're doing here, or if that's an outmoded paradigm that really, no, we should use a different, or I should use a different paradigm and try to look at it. Does that make any sense at all? So, I mean, is that so it's a little difficult to go through this and figure out, okay, where's the content? You know, I can come up with about 1.6 million. But I think that's a very incomplete picture of really what's the content.
So also, I think it's a longer discussion.
Yeah,
I also think that, to me, my starting point is where's the impact for the community? And that is the staff that are helping identify those resources for the community. That's the help that they provide, that's the technology, that's the services. Content is part of that. My starting point on that framework is what's the impact we're trying to have as a library.
so
And you know, but I like how I think the larger question is how do we as a library, you as a board and as a city, have a shared understanding of the role of the library and the value, and then how we're making sure that we're aligning our, all those resources in support of that. My initial reaction to that, like I said, I think it's a longer discussion, and two, I put it with impact first as opposed to content, because of those issues of, equity and how we're making sure that we've got materials that reflect the whole community and people can use it, and that we're, breaking down barriers. So that's where my starting point is, but
It's harder to measure.
it's absolutely harder to measure.
I think that's value, and I think a lot of the programs fall in that category, which is why I'm trying to incorporate them. But yeah, you're right that service delivery does and also include a staff member who can direct somebody to the right information or, answer their question. That's impact as well. So I agree with you on that.
And I'll say one other thing that we're actually going to tee up for a board discussion later on. We had a group that recently ran what's called a business value calculator that was created by the Urban Libraries Council to look at that, like how much can we actually put a dollar amount on the amount of support that we have for small and medium businesses. And we'll bring that to the board so you can look at, because it is really hard to measure that impact. And this is a tool that we recently ran that I think you'll really like it. Because I think that question of how in a service delivery model like the library has, how are you quantifying that?
I guess I do have one question that, like, if you go to the main page, web page of the library, there's this resources section on the left, and it gets you to a long catalog of electronic services that, which I assume we're paying for. Where are those in these line items? Things like, there's some of these small business reports. There's
It's under the 537014 for digital materials. It's all lumped into that one. He looks into the audio.
On page 14.
so
53704.
okay. It's all in there. Do you have sort of a back of the envelope number of what does that stuff cost relative to like the audiobooks, ebooks?
Yes, we spent probably about $220 to $230 on digital resource subscriptions. And last year, I think we spent about $320 on ebooks and the audiobooks.
Wow, that's a big number for those.
They're
Resources.
really expensive. Yeah, the digital resources, and we try to make sure that what we're subscribing to is what people are using and that we're filling a need, because it is a very lengthy list.
I'm very long term. I'm very interested in that usage and what you're saying.
So I think that can be expanded into an upcoming board meeting, because I think, again, that's a piece. And knowing the limits to when you do purchase it, right? We have very limited I'm not gonna try to quote the number of times that you can check out an audiobook or an ebook, but it is very restricted. I know we talked about that, but that might be really built into a future meeting also with incoming board members
Right.
too, because it is such a large expense. I think that, you know, when we look at our expenses and we go as board members to put the expenses each month. I also see this not just as books and, you know, physical materials, but I also see the programming, the impact and what we're improving on those expenses. And so I think that that's kind of helpful. I was trying to reflect on what Phil was saying, what we're hearing. But this does give us an opportunity to see kind of at a month by month activity or what is transpiring within each of the locations. And it's not always, like I said, just necessarily materials in that impact. And then the last piece that I'll kind of jump onto is that Nikki brought up a point too, you know, watching the YouTube, I watched it not in real time, but that was incredibly helpful to watch the city's budget process and really be able to hear all the different departments. And I would encourage us as a board going forward to make sure that we're doing that on an annual basis, especially prior to sitting down and our particular budget, how we kind of fit into that whole piece, so to speak.
I just briefly, I was just going to touch on the digital resources. So that is in our circulation numbers. I think we get these every month. Do we get these monthly? So it has e-magazine, 2,800 users, e-video, ebook. So it does kind of break it down there on page 24. If that's helpful. And then it's just.
But this doesn't have those digital resources.
I think it does down here. If you go down to the. Yeah, so it's in the circulation number there. Right here. So e-magazines, e-music, e-video.
I'm trying, I think there's a.
Oh, not
Yeah,
for
I think-
not for the database usage.
Right,
You're absolutely
that's-
right. We
That's
don't
what I'm
report on
referring to.
Okay.
database usage is separate.
And then I was gonna say that in the database charges I've seen, that's actually lower than I would expect. So I don't know if it's, we just don't have as many of those resources or.
Well,
Shrewd
we got to
negotiator.
then, well, yes, true negotiator, like huge negotiator, and they're not at that.
Yeah, most of what I've seen are the,
You would have,
they're really pricey.
No.
Yeah, okay.
but yes, not a huge negotiator.
Okay, so it would be helpful to know what kind of usage those other things are getting, and I'd be curious the cost of just those versus the e-magazines, just more breakdown at some other meeting.
Thank you.
So I think I'll round out my discussion, talking about the Heritage Fund. And the Heritage Fund, it's on page 17 and 18. We broke it out to two different components. One is library donations, formerly called Gift Fund. And then the interlibrary system. So we keep track of the Links Consortium dollars and budgets separately. So I just want to quickly touch base on library donations. If you look at the fiscal year 23 revenue over 22, we are showing a $60,000 increase. And this is with the anticipated continued contribution from the Mary Clara Allison Charitable Trust. So we received that this year, and my understanding from the foundation is that we will anticipate the continuation of that. The expenditure budget for the library donations, it's basically placeholders. We kind of try to figure out where we think the anticipated spend is going to be for fiscal year 23. Work with input from department managers and Jessica. And so for the time being, this is how we think the budget is going to look and play out. And then on the next page 18 is the integrated library system. So this budget reflects the service levels under the Links Consortium agreement. And this was at the time of budget build. So revenue overview, the account that's titled the IOLS 308001. That is the consortium member contribution. So the agreed upon contribution that the consortium agrees to contribute towards the fund. And this is for towards the annual fee for contingency and replacement. So for this budget bill, we are projecting that to be roughly 50,000. And then the consortium members will contribute the 39,000, and then the city of Boise, based on our percentage of the share, is 15,883, which is shown in the transfers in. Because the city of Boise's contribution is coming from the general fund. So we show it as a transfer in from the general fund. And then, of course, interest income is based on your current balance, projected or anticipated interest earnings. And that really is a best guess estimate. Under the maintenance and operations, the professional services budget, we do have 50,000 budgeted for the annual fee, as I had mentioned, for the contingency and replacement fund. And then there is a placeholder for the strategic planning. We wanted to make sure that in case we continued on or explored alternative avenues on strategic planning for the consortium agreement. I'm sorry, I did misspeak, not strategic planning, but the consortium. So we wanted to have budget there in case we did want to, work with a consultant and not have to go back for an IDC. So at least there's some funding there for that. And then there's a small membership fee, and then also the software system maintenance account is for telemessaging server annual charge. And on the capital projects, the 11,000, that is the capital component of our discovery layer. I did want to mention, I want to just quickly go back on for the library donation funds. The current ending fund balance as of April 30th was approximately 284,000. So that is what we have in the bank we received from donations. That's over and above what the revenue and expenditure budget is. It's just where we are current day. And then for the ILS system budget, the ending fund balance is approximately 1.13 million. So do I have any questions on either of those accounts in the Heritage Fund?
Thanks for walking us through that.
You're welcome. Thank you for
Thank
listening.
you, Kim.
You're welcome.
It's very helpful.
Next, we're gonna have Kathy do it. Kathy's gonna pick up some of the work on page 21, and then we'll have sort of the Kathy, Sean action on, but she's gonna highlight a couple of things. Then we'll bring Sean up to talk more.
Again, page 22.
Are you 22? Sorry. Follow the bouncing ball, didn't quite get far enough.
So I'm just gonna try to keep mine quick. Sean has a really great presentation. So major equipment. So for FY 23, we are asking for a few things for major equipment. One of them, and these ones are just sort of the ongoing, we know it's going to be kind of a thing that we do in order to keep the facilities going. One of the things is a vehicle. So that would be a 1-ton courier van. We have furniture replacements as everything is going up in cost. We've increased that a little bit last year and looking forward. Laptop kiosks, we do still have where you can walk up and check out a laptop. We have them at Maine, Colomustic, and Hillcrest. So they're on a replacement cycle, just like our other IT things. And because they're so expensive, they fall into this. The shelving replacement is the one thing that is a one-time ask. And that is Hillcrest has had some issues with their shelving since we opened. So we want to see if we can repair the shelving there. We might need to replace some of it. And then we are looking to do some replacement of shelving here at the main library as well with what we have remaining, so that we can get a little bit more line of sight in some of our areas where we have some issues. Want to make sure that we keep security and mine. I'm happy to speak to any other equipment things that you might have seen along the way, or if you have any questions. Thank you, Catherine.
And while we're on page 22, I will just point out at the bottom of this, this is the piece that I mentioned is a work in progress, where we have put some placeholders. And when those get filled in, we will be coming back to you in that interim budget.
Talking about major equipment.
No, I'm talking about capital.
Capital projects.
So the library staff study, the fourth floor workroom renovation, first floor. So Sean's gonna talk about like what that means from a work point of view. This is where we put in for the budget, that indication that we will be filling. The first one we are further along. I thought I'd take advantage of the fact we're still on the work.
We're excited, but thank you for your service.
Amazing.
All right, I put together a little bit of slideshow, and Tanya, it's been an honor to work with you for the past 7 or 8 years. Found journey, so many other journeys together, but
Thank
you've
you.
done great things for the
That's
library.
perfect to have you here in my last meeting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Appreciate it.
Josh,
Josh?
so anyways, to start off, it is on the MRM side and the capital side, it's a little confusing right now. So Public Works is, as you've heard from Rob and York, taking over that. And once we do, we'll get everything plugged into our asset management system. So it'll be a little more predictable. So it'll like kick out, here's our next 10 years of projects we want to do. So it'll be a lot more specific. The other interesting part is, you jump ahead, Josh, one. The libraries had kind of deferred maintenance for a while. So like in probably the early 2010s, the previous facilities plans, envisioned something new. And we're like, well, let's hold back on our investments. So that went on for quite a while. And I started digging into the building. 2018, we did a seismic evaluation, just to determine how the building would perform in an earthquake. 2020, we did a condition assessment, and we started before COVID, and it just kind of wrapped up during that COVID period. We did an ADA analysis, and that wrapped up later in 2020. And then plan of attack. I think I did a board update in October of 2020. Phil and Tanya, I don't know if you remember, my dog started choking in the background. Everybody's camera went like blank to make it all laugh. It was funny as heck. But that was kind of the last time I think I was around, kind of giving an update. All right, so kind of, and I don't expect you to read all this, but just to kind of demonstrate the list of needs of the building. Tons of needs, from roofs to heating systems to heat pumps, window replacement, floor finishes, a whole bunch of stuff. Rob Boesfield and I tried to break it out into kind of a 5-year plan, because it's impossible. Your operating building can't shut down, and cash flow reasons. So we worked with the budget office and said, hey, by the looks of it, and I put draft because these are BC numbers before COVID, like you can add 30% of anything in there. Worked with finance. We said, hey, can you just allocate big chunks for us every year for the next 5 years, so we can start knocking some of these projects out. Josh, you want to jump in? So I just wanted to walk through the facility and talk about the different things happening. And then in the end, I'll kind of give a little summary on how we're getting organized, where we're at. And one of the things, and Phil, you probably remember this, Tanya, we tried to push out some of the higher cost things like the site to give Heidi and her great work time to come up with the strategic planning and eventually start looking at facilities again. So we're trying to make investments in a wise fashion. Some things we have no choice, like the roof. The other day, the one story, I was planning on deferring that one, but then I started walking around, there's leaks down in use section, and we went out, and anyways, it's like, nope, it's back on the list. But we have like a set amount of money in 21 and 22 that was allocated. We also had some year-end savings from last fiscal year. So we have a giant sort of, I wouldn't say giant, definitely can't fund all the needs, but we have enough to start knocking out chunks of the building. So what we're doing is kind of working on that right now, and I'll get to that in a little bit. From a improvements perspective, we have both roofs need to be replaced. The one on the 4-story has been on my radar forever. It's like an old tile roof. It's decades old. Seems to be holding up better than the newer roof on the 1-story. It was replaced 30 years ago. We need secondary drainage up there, so we're gonna like bust in new drainage to the 4th floor, and then also down the 1-story. Parapet repairs, the entire parapet is just an older building, 1940s vintage, so we have to update the parapet. Life safety improvements, right now, they're not, I shouldn't be walking around the roof because you need to actually be attached to the parapet's not tall enough, so we need to just do some life safety stuff up there. And then also on the 1-story, we have some HVAC improvements. That's the two giant square boxes sitting up on the roof. One of them's due, I think, fiscal year 23. And Josh? Site improvements. So the city owns pretty much the entirety of the site from River to River Street, 8th to 9th, except for a small piece right here. The Merrill Trust owns that. We have our strategic real estate manager talking to them about it, potentially maybe purchase or something. So we'd own the entire site. There's some improvements going on here. The Wasco Center is looking into some improvements. We have some CCDC improvements that are also happening outside of this. We have, I think, a couple million doing a study through this whole corridor right here to see if there's other improvements that can be made there. But the main thing for us, and we push this out a couple more fiscal years, is the site is just, it's way beyond its useful life, and it's just dysfunctional how you get in and out of it and how the space is used. We have these weird angled parking. It kind of follows old parcel lines if you look at the history of the property. That's why you got the kind of the strangeness of it. But for this year, what we're focusing on for the site is doing just like fixing the potholes, trying to duct tape baling wire, I call it, fix. Again, to kind of push out that larger investment that needs to be done out there. And the reason it's a large investment, the second you start working on it and doing those major fixes, you kick in drainage, and then we have to pull all the drainage and take care of it on site, and just becomes a lot. So definitely a few $1 million worth of work, but there is some work we're trying to do, get a little better ADA, fix some curbs. We're looking at all the staircases going off on the 1-story on that side, it's cracked concrete, that sort of stuff, but trying to just sort of patch and fix whatever we can. Right, Josh? Level 1 improvements. So our primary focus has been MRM, ADA, like the restrooms are now all ADA compliant. And especially on the 4-story, and I didn't show it on here, I apologize. The entire corridor where the restrooms, elevator are, there's a giant plumbing chase and other things in there, and we have a bunch of 40s plumbing. So we're looking at, as we do the complete restroom remodel and ADA work, that we also start taking out all the 40s plumbing and replacing it. We have like little leaks all over the building. Dave is our maintenance person here, has been chasing them for years, and so we're just like, okay, we need to fix it. It becomes a risk. And some accessibility improvements. The other thing we found fiscal year 23 opportunities, and those are on the list without the numbers, is since we're in here doing so much work on ADA, like for example, the CERT desk, is not ADA compliant. These restrooms over here need to be completely redone. We made a request, or we're making a request fiscal year 23 while we're in here doing this. Why don't we renovate the space? Like youth services is busy a space. Why not, instead of just demoing this part, like look at retooling this whole area. And so that's the one request you'll see on the first, I forget what it's called, 1-story improvements or something. For fiscal year 23. And the other one is, since we're doing a bunch of work here, why don't we step up our game and put in a request to put an auto sorter in? So the financial survey tool, why not take care of all this at one shot? And that's why you see a couple of those new fiscal year 23 requests. So Josh, level 2 and 3 improvements are mainly all in the core. As I mentioned, it's the restrooms, Plumbing, all that stuff. So we're just kind of taking care of the entire 4-story residence plumbing. Super exciting. Josh. Local floor improvements, same things, part of that core with plumbing, the restrooms, code stuff. But while, again, it's kind of the same scenario, while we're up there, you know, and there's other stuff, like we're doing finishes and security and other stuff that I'll get on the next slide. We thought, well, why don't we look at maximizing back of house space? So that's another little thing you'll see on the CIP line. That was just a small amount we're requesting to do a business case. Should we have back of house here, or should we be thinking like back of house in other locations, whether it's a new location like Public Works, we're also building a giant facilities support over by the airport over the next 2 or 3 years. Lots of space. We'd be looking, you know, we have fire there, parks there. Do we also have a small space for library at that location to move stuff, operational stuff like ETS stuff that, because this is like high quality, expensive real estate downtown, you know, and so maximizing, I guess, public access to the real estate is kind of the goal of that study. And then
Do you expect to have the public on the 4th floor after this?
not with these improvements. You know, that would, so as we do the studies and figure out and strategic planning is, you know, more ground. Then we can inform any future budget requests or capital requests to do something like that. But I feel like all the studies sort of kind of built a baseline first before we
Okay.
And I
make a
think
decision.
directionally, the more we can get staff that doesn't engage with the public as part of their job onto the 4th floor, the more we can use the floors below for more public space.
Okay.
And then kind of building wide improvements as part of this project, ongoing project, and this will be going for years. Stair railing systems. I mean, there's real odd stuff you probably not noticed. We actually took Jessica on a tour this week. When you're walking down the staircase on the 4th floor, the railing's not compliant. Like you would never notice it except for like, oh yeah, these are 6 inches apart. You know, kids stick their head. That's why it's supposed to be 4 inches. That's the code requirement. And so it's kind of throughout railing throughout the library. It has these little chunks that are just not code compliant that we need to fix. Security, we did as part of our MRM planning, like a security, and this will just be in every part of the library we touch. We're looking at how do we bring up security updates. For example, by just get key cards on your admin, so not everybody's got to have a key, certain people have access, so we're starting to get everything carded and kind of get away from the keys. Exterior grout and envelope, like the building looks pretty good from a distance, but you get a little closer to it, you can kind of see the grout shrinking, cracking, and so there's a entire grout job outside of the building to just seal it out, make sure the envelope get more life out of it. HVAC, we need to update on the 1-story HVAC system. Windows, there's still some more pane windows throughout the building, so we're looking at, hey, can we start swapping those out? Just good for energy, all that good stuff. There's a 4th floor finishes project. I don't know when the last time y'all have been up there, but it's a dreaded old rundown. It definitely has had no attention to it for many decades. I'm sure. I don't know. Then elevators. I think we put in 200,000 or 300,000 to fix that elevator, whatever that looked like. Whatever it looks like, I don't know. We haven't hired the contractor to do that. But it's clunky. I don't think it has smoke doors on it that are required, and there's some other things. So the elevator needs attention. So from an implementation perspective, we have 2 architects working on the project right now. We'll probably bring on a couple more for the specialty stuff, like an elevator, you know, it's a specialty type of engineering. Design's fully in progress with some components complete. So we're knocking out the design, like the 2nd floor restrooms are done. We're replacing the fire pump for the entire facility too. That's also past its life, which you don't want. Arc flash labeling on all the electrical equipment. We do have a bunch of this stuff complete. We're sitting on it because we have a construction manager that we just hired. We're getting them under contract now. They're working on the project. to start looking at, like, if we do all these pieces, how can we sequence them correctly to keep as much open as possible? So they're starting to put together those schedules, how would it look like, and then we'll definitely all work with the library staff and say, okay, can I shut down this part of the building for 4 months and then this one for 3 months? So the scheduling is kind of a work in progress. Definitely a few months out on that. Some of the design is integrated with future projects. That's that first floor. That's why we're making that request while we're down there. Just knock it out. Operations coordination is critical. That's why we're taking our time to sure to get this right. Construction market challenges. I'm sure you've all seen it. It's, yeah, I mean, housing price, everything in the construction world is just, I feel like it's extortion at some point, some of the pricing we've been getting. We did call around to roof suppliers. We don't have the design ready to go bid it, but we're just trying to get a feel for lead times. And they're just like, well, we'll get it to you in a year, but we won't even guarantee the price until we start fabricating it. It's like, we can't do that. So we're trying to look at different avenues on how to procure the stuff, which could play into the scheduling thing too, you know, if we can't get up there, but quite a bit of huge challenges. The other part is we have way more work than we have budget. And so we're kind of prioritizing like, hey, let's get this one done first, this second, and making sure we're hitting kind of the high priority areas. With input, of course, from Jessica and team, like, hey, I want this, I need this. And then from my perspective, I'm trying to stabilize the building the best I can. So I'm gonna have my opinions from a building perspective. Yeah, and work in progress. So just kind of a look ahead, roof section, we got a 4th floor, 3rd floor work, 2nd, 1st. Josh, you could jump to 2 clicks. There it is. So we're doing all that. In future, we have still a bunch of big work. I just want to flag that. The 1-story plumbing, the entire grout repair is another big chunk, the entire electrical system, a lot of the lighting still needs to be upgraded to LED, and a site replacement. So these, I think those are BC numbers. So just add 30%. So with that, any questions? I know there's some questions like spending curves, those sorts of things I've heard in previous discussions. So a lot of work is happening in the background. It'll be sort of a steep spin. We'll probably still crawl, encumber some stuff through this fiscal year. And then maybe next spring is where we start that steeper spending curve where we start getting things in construction, chunks of the building isolated and worked on.
When would you expect to dive into that site replacement and start trying to come up with a design for that?
I put it in the request, the budget request. I put it fiscal year 25 as not a request, I guess the forecasting. I don't do one year at a time, but so I know our finance department's holding fiscal year 25. The thing that may push our hand a little bit, the ACHD, CCDC has some projects coming up in the next couple fiscal years on Capitol Street. So depending on how that sticks out, like if they start those in fiscal year 23, we would probably want to start looking at the site concepts in parallel with them, so we can take advantage. Like if they do all the streetscape, we want to look at our curb cuts. We have optimized egress and all that stuff.
So maybe 24, maybe
start looking at it, designing, because so both of those organizations, they're design in 23, build in 24. I think is what they're talking about. So.
Would it make any sense to do a design at the same time they're doing theirs, or do you have to wait till they're done?
If they both start in fiscal year 23, and I'm still talking to Jessica and team about this, I think we should start in parallel with ours to make sure we don't miss an opportunity to get it's part of.
Okay.
I forgot to ask a question relating to the payment of monthly bills and the consent agenda. There was one item I didn't recognize. I think I just learned what it was. Trout architect, is that homework for the budget?
Yeah, Trout's one of our architects on this job, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Sean? A lot of great information. There's a lot of work to be done. I think that's great job security. All of the projects. But to be very great, really, that high level overview, Sean, is very helpful. I know for the board to hear the work that does need to be done.
Hope it's helpful. I know it's hard when you're reading because I've read the budget reports, they're not simple. But in the background, we got a lot of stuff sort of churning in.
Yeah, to your point, there's a lot of stuff in the background, so that is good information. That's something that you want.
And we'll, yeah, so when we have that, we'll have Sean back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we went on the budget for fiscal year 23. Okay, so a lot of discussion today, a lot of information again, and see how much has gone into the process. And so next steps, we're going to split this out into two actions. So if I'm actually on page 2 of our agenda, section 6. CD there in regards to the fiscal year budget, and as you see, we do have an action item there to approve, amend, reject. So with that, do I have a motion from a board member to make a motion to approve fiscal year 23 budget for city council, to send to city council?
I'll make a motion that we approve the library's fiscal year 2023 proposed budget.
Thank you, Bill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, thank you, Brian. Okay, all board members in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right, then next up under 6B is the interim fiscal change that Jessica had discussed. And so again, do I have a motion to approve the recommended items, which again, is from
Page 23.
thank you, Jessica. On page 23 for the capital fund for the automated sorter, do I have a motion?
Mind my answer? Yes, Sally. I was wondering, we're not spending budget anywhere near to budget on capital projects for fiscal year 22. Why do we need to request additional funding when we have so much left in our budget?
We're requesting the money for this specific purpose, for this one.
So,
It's additional as opposed,
yeah, I don't want to slow us down, but the budget, if you change the items in the budget, you have to get approved.
yes,
That's a good question.
yeah, no, and that, you're right, it is a good question. It's not how your own budget works. Whereas if you don't spend something, you just move the money in. But it is how a city does its budget, where once something's approved for a purpose and it goes into the account code. Then even if it goes at a different time, we're still requesting additional.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Any other questions? So with that, do I have a motion to on the board there to approve?
I move that we recommend that we forward the request to council for consideration.
Right, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you for that. That was really good discussion, and I think some opportunities to expand on for future ones. All right, next up is the selection of the trustee for bills and our payment vouchers. And it looks like Brian, you're up for this month. Does that
Yes,
work for you, sir?
just notifying the first full week in July, I'm gone. I can via email, but I can't sign that.
Okay, We'll let Carrie know.
All the rest of the time
For
are
her
here.
planning, so first full week, is that meaning that
I'm gone for the 4th of July.
the 4th of July?
We fall.
Okay, so
4th of
July 1st is a Friday, so you're gone the 4th of 8th,
Right,
back to the 11th.
Yeah. and I'm happy to do this anyway.
I'll let her know.
Yep, I got that.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for mentioning that for us, too. All right, next meeting is Wednesday, July 13th. Are there any conflicts for that meeting? We'll have to. Okay, all right, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
Please, sorry.
So sorry.
Thank you, Sarah.
We're not, just kidding, just kidding.
I'm really excited to introduce to the board Ashley Hammond, who's our new mental health coordinator. She started May 31st.
Welcome, Ashley. We're excited to have you here. It's a long time coming.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're getting your orientation scheduled for the week and where will you be located at? You're within the library.
So I'm on the first floor in the Gates room. So I think that's gonna be kind of my hub, but the plan is to send me out to Hollister and Hillcrest and Cole and Houston to be available for patrons there. Yeah, so I'm very excited about this opportunity and kind of building this position, so.
We are as well.
Yeah, we're excited to have you.
We're trying not to scare you off. We're gonna like ease into it.
Yeah, I just, you know, I think that this is very worthwhile and I think it's so meaningful that the recognition for this position to be here and the impact that this can have on our community.
Yeah, welcome aboard. We're excited. I know we'll get a chance to see you. Sure, as we're out and about.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Any other questions for Jessica? All right, I'm glad we.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
All right, so we really are going to take a motion.
There are we?
Is that good? Sarah? Is that good?
Just quickly, I wanted to say thank you so much to all the staff for putting together such good information
Yes.
for us on the budget. I'm sure that's a lot of work. I appreciate it. Just being newer and having some of that background. So, I would move to.
Forgot that recognition. All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Brian, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, you have to sign it and all.
Oh, I can now.
This.
Well, this is the first time I've seen it in person, so. I really them in person. What are you so?